Thank you, Madam Speaker. Earlier this year, I informed the House about the collapse of First Guardian Master Fund. It was marketed as a high-growth super investment, but resulted in severe losses. It was then believed some 6,000 investors, some in Leppington, and up to $600 million was affected. Since then, it can now be revealed that the scale of this disaster has practically doubled. According to the latest information revealed by the Australian Securities and Investment Commission, more than 11,000 Australians have now been caught up in the collapse of the First Guardian and Shield master funds, with over $1.2 billion in retirement savings potentially lost. What began as a major concern has now grown into one of the most significant superannuation failures in our nation's history. In recent months, ASIC has launched significant enforcement action in response to what it described as industrial-scale misconduct. It has launched in the action against intra-pack financial planning for failing to ensure its representatives act in clients' best interest and for facilitating more than $600 million in super investments into First Guardian and Shield. It's launched action against Ferris Murhi for allegedly directing clients into these schemes while receiving almost $40 million in fees, commissions and marketing payments. And it has also taken action against SQM Research for allegedly issuing favourable ratings of high-risk products in ways ASIC says has misled consumers. These actions, some of which ASIC has described as first of their kind, highlight the scale of systemic failure and the growing scrutiny of the broader network of financial actors that enabled these funds to reach mainstream superannuation platforms. Among the most serious issues is how easily First Guardian and Shield were able to appear on major superannuation platforms, including Macquarie Wrap, Netwealth, OneView and AMP's North platform. The inclusion of these funds on mainstream platforms gave them the perception of credibility and drove inflows from advisors and consumers alike. Macquarie, under regulatory pressure from ASIC, has agreed to fully reimburse Shield investors on its platform, a $321 million commitment. Other platforms should now seriously consider following Macquarie's lead. The scandal is not the fault of one government, one regulator or one era. It has been decades in the making under multiple regulatory regimes. The deeper problem is structural, and that is that the industry is riddled with inherent conflicts. Funds rely on platforms to distribute products. Platforms rely on advisors to drive inflows, and advisors rely on commissions and incentives. All of these then depend on research houses which are paid by the very funds they are meant to assess. Every link in the chain is conflicted, and those conflicts ultimately left consumers last. Victims and advocacy groups have been very clear in their demands. They want to see an expansion and strengthen of the compensation scheme of last resort so that victims have access to redress. They'd like to see the adoption of a pay now, recover later model, as used in the HIH collapse and the National Redress Scheme, whereby government compensates the victims upfront and then recovers funds from those responsible. The trustees, the licensees, the product issuers and the research houses and potentially their directors. They want to see the strengthening of governance and accountability by enforcing platform and trustee transparency, by holding research houses to account, and by banning conflicted remuneration for high-risk products. And finally, they would like to see a full parliamentary inquiry, and that's something I also called for earlier this year when I spoke on this issue. We must examine how First Guardian and Shield bypassed oversight, how they accessed major platforms, how trustee and research house scrutiny failed, how hundreds of millions of dollars were moved offshore, and how this conduct escaped ASIC, APRA and AUSTRAC despite repeated red flags. At the centre of this scandal are everyday Australians who did nothing wrong. Teachers, retail workers, carers and tradespeople. They worked hard and they entrusted their futures to a system that promised security. Instead, their life savings were used to buy sports cars, fund lavish lifestyles and were channelled offshore, far from the reach of ordinary Australians. The only just outcome is for most, if not all of these victims' funds to be recovered. They were let down by the system, and it was a system that claimed to safeguard them. It is now that system's responsibility to deliver justice, reform and accountability.